Just get them over and over.
And we're live.
Oh, we're live, everybody. Hello. I'm not actually a dermatologist.
Having fast.
Just a minute.
Hi, everybody. You're at hashtag SPSM. It's the Suicide Prevention Social Media Chat. I'm at Doc Foreman, but you knew that. And if you didn't, you're different now. You're welcome. We want to give a shout out to Noreen, who is out sick again. And, you know, she's just had a hell of a spring. So, Noreen, we are thinking of you. It sounds like you've been a little miserable lately, and you are just the best sport. So, like, get well soon. I'm really excited. We were going to be doing SPSM tonight to be talking about video games and suicide prevention and about how, well, sort of the social element of video games and what we think, the various ways we think that ties into suicide prevention. But there were a bunch of news events again this week, and this has been the spring of sort of news events bogarting our schedule. So the schedule's moved around a bit. So some of you may read Mashable and some of you may read The Guardian, but we're going to talk about Facebook's leaked guidelines about suicide and self-injury. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that may or may not mean for people's risk and for intervening in vicarious trauma and policies and a bunch of things. We're also really, really excited to have a repeat SPSM alum with us. Also from the AAS board, we have Amelia Leto with us today, and we're going to do some introductions that many of you know who she is, and she's right down there. But before we go too much further, I want to introduce you to our intrepid tech producer and chair of the board of the American Association of Suicidology, Mr. Tony Wood.
Hello, everybody. I have a terrible cold this week. So just check out suicidology.org and join AS today. Bart?
Oh, well, thank you, Tony. It's Bart Andrews. You can find me on Twitter at Bart Andrews. I'm at an amazing crisis agency in St. Louis, Missouri, Behavioral Health Response. Excited to be on the show. Always excited to be joined by Amelia, who is truly one of the most sweet, never has a bad thing to say about anybody except me, which I think says a lot about her character. Yeah, I find that interesting. No bad words about anybody but moi. But I forgive, I forget, I don't harbor resentments. I move on, I let things go. And I'm excited about the show, even though it's a really sad and kind of a bummy topic, to be quite honest.
Yeah, tonight's topic is going to have a lot of sort of the, woo, what do we do about it? But before we get to that, Chris Maxwell. Chris, say hi to the people.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Maxwell. I work for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I really think that this is an incredibly important topic, and so I'm glad that we're going to be addressing it in this format, and hopefully everybody is going to take this information and go and do some amazing things with it. So glad to be here.
And Amelia, say hey to everyone.
Hello, I'm Amelia Leto. I am the Crisis Centers Division Director for the American Association of Suicidology, and I work for a groovy little crisis center in Oakland County, Michigan called Common Ground. I've always wanted to steal Bart's line, and then I did it, and I don't regret it.
Amelia, you're part of the reason that I made the schedule change this week.
You're welcome.
So a bunch of things happened that made me feel like this was a topic that we absolutely had to cover on SPSM this week. And it oddly enough was not that. Rebecca Ruiz, who's one of our favorite journalists from Mashable, emailed me at the beginning of the week, and she said, you have time between Monday and Tuesday to do a brief interview about Facebook's leaked guidelines. I mean, we have been talking about how Facebook has hired 3,000 people to start moderating content, especially live streaming content. And we knew that this was related to suicide and self-injury. But what happened was a bunch of internal documents from Facebook leaked the manuals for these moderators and what their policies and guidelines were. And so Rebecca Ruiz was interviewing me, and then she interviewed Dan Reidenberg, who works closely with Facebook on these things. And we all know Dan, he's fabulous. But that was me being in Mashable as absolutely cool as I think that is, and Mashable, I think that is like super cool. It was actually Amelia and two other people sending people my way to consult about the very issue that was in Mashable. that made me think probably we have to start generating media on it. Amelia, we don't want to talk about people's private lives without their permission, but maybe Amelia, if you could sort of give an appropriate version of how you sent folks my way.
Well, there was a recent live stream suicide that was quite public and had been reported on through national media outlets, and someone had reached out about the response and how they should appropriately connect with those affected by this live stream suicide. And I pointed them your way, as well as Dan Reidenberg's from save.org, because you are leading experts in this kind of new field of suicide prevention in social media.
And I want to thank you. I mean, I don't know that it's always exciting to see these consultations because usually something really bad's happened. But, I think when you're working in suicide prevention, and I think Bart and Crystal and Amelia will all echo me on this, like consultation is how we get through the day. Like you're not ever, if you do good work, you're not ever making decisions all by yourself. You're definitely doing them sort of in collaboration with your peers, and especially new things. Yeah. This was really, really difficult because a whole bunch of people witnessed the suicide, right? Yeah. It was, it had a pretty large audience, and by nature of these platforms, it's shareable content, as graphic and traumatic and awful as it is. People are interested for whatever morbid reasons or for whatever reasons of concern. They are clicking and watching this happen live before them. And you might even see someone's live suicide, and it might not be someone you know very well, and you might be front row witness to their attempt or possibly their death, which could have happened before. I mean, we talked about, like, even when SPSM was new about doing an N hero on 4chan or whatever. So, I mean, people were live streaming the suicides before, but, it was somebody who was relatively techie, who knew how to do it, to a relatively sort of inside baseball social media platform where people were equally very techie and very young. But Facebook Live is really easy, like almost anyone can use it. And so there's sort of been a shift. Have you heard of more cases than just the one that you referred my way?
There have been a number of recent reports. Typically, I've seen it in the last 6 months, there's been an uptick, but live streaming suicides have happened for at least the past 10 years on different platforms and live streaming venues. There was, I think one of the earliest was in 2008 on a platform called Justin.tv, and people had been encouraging this person to die by suicide. People had shared concern with this person. People were shocked that this was a true death by suicide that they were witnessing, and didn't realize the impact of this person's actions until after the fact. And that was 10 years ago. So this is not new behavior, unfortunately, but we are seeing it more and more, and we're seeing interventions more and more as well, of cross collaboration between different police departments and first responders reaching out to these people that are attempting to take their life via live stream platforms.
We want to really be clear, and we're going to talk about some of the foundations for this, including someone even mentioned to me Buddhist monks setting themselves on fire in protests and having that be broadcast on the nightly news. That the media has really struggled with how to cover these sorts of things for various reasons. We're going to talk about that. But then there's this issue of vicarious traumatization that's just now on a scale we've never seen before with suicide, and it looks like we're sort of on the doorsteps of that, which is why we're going to talk about that tonight. Bart, what did you think when I started talking about this earlier this week?
Well, I did a lot of thinking about it, and I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is that we've had live suicides occurring in our culture since we've been around. It's really interesting how everything gets amplified because social media gets attached to it, right? Oh my God, this is happening when people have been standing on bridges with crowds around them, encouraging them to jump, screaming at them, acting like nothing's happening. So we act like this is something new or shocking, and I'm sorry, it's not. There's a new way that people are engaging with each other. So there's this platform, just like I'm guessing bridges were new at some point. And you see people kind of losing their shit about it, when in fact this is something we're used to, unfortunately. And we have to adapt to this new technology and what that means. And so a lot of people kind of, their asses kind of clenched when they heard that Facebook was not instantly shutting these folks down. And I think one of the things in reading all of the materials that I could around this the last couple of days is there's no easy answer for this. And so we've got to do some of take the best guesses we can about what the best approach is that minimizes harm and maximizes opportunities to help. And I think that kind of freaks people out. But this is a crowd, I'm sorry, the suicide prevention community kind of freaks out on a regular basis. So can't say I'm shocked.
You know, I heard a lot of reactions to the guidelines, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute because I'm going to sort of read some of the numbers from Facebook or Facebook. It's not that it's a live stream suicide. We've talked about that before. It's that there are going to be so many of them, and so these are not like, and it's going to become more common than people maybe are ready for, and that's sort of what has my gears turning, which is the contagion. But Chris, what were your thoughts about the events this week?
Yeah, kind of running off of what Bart just mentioned, you know, we've seen these things live, like Bud Dwyer. I don't know if you know of him. He was a politician who killed himself during a press conference on air. I mean, it was in front of a bunch of people. It was very violent. Christine Chubbuck,
by the way.
Yeah, Christine Chubbuck back in the 70s was the reporter who died on air. And, you know, it was very dramatic. It was very in your face, very similar to these things. However, in both of those cases, because of the medium, we were able to restrict the audience after the fact. So the post-vention aspect was very different. And that we were, I mean, like the video for Christine's suicide is locked away. Like one person has a copy of that video and they're never going to release it. We don't have that luxury with social media.
We
because once it's up on the, well, yeah, sure. But I mean, and there are ways that we can work around it. But unfortunately, a lot of times once something is up on the internet, it's there and it's spread and it's shared. So looking at, you know, I think it's really important that we start looking at ways that we can take advantage of that viral capacity and how we can use those aspects of social media to provide people with the care and support that they need after something like this happens.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that because like the potential for contagion is big, but there's sort of very different sort of potentials for intervention. There's probably multiple technology solutions that probably haven't been tried or like considered, and also a lot of data science opportunities. And like we've got to talk about why this is sort of a little bit different. In some ways it's the same, and we're going to talk about restricting the audience because this is sort of an interesting sort of part of all these interventions. I'm wondering, I am the only, you know, I work in as a suicide prevention coordinator at VA. I'm not talking, you know, in conjunction with my VA job, but part of my day job has been to intervene with people in crisis. But I am not a crisis center person the same way that Amelia and Bart are, or the same way that Chris is. Can you guys talk a little bit about when you have somebody who's attempting a suicide in public, what the intervention sort of is from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to jump in. I mean, we really do try not to send police as much as possible. We want to minimize use of law enforcement because we think there's a lot better ways to help people at risk of suicide. However, if someone is in the midst of an attempt, that's pretty much a guaranteed we're going to try to do an immediate rescue and keep them engaged while we do the.
Amelia, did Bart freeze for you?
Bart froze.
And Chris.
Oh, wait, there.
Yeah,
Bart's back.
There goes.
Go ahead.
So I think that if one of my mobile outreach team members is out and there's a suicide in progress, they're going to keep talking to the person and they're going to do what they can, but we're going to get emergency personnel. If we're on the phone with somebody, we're going to do that. If we would get a call from somebody about a Facebook suicide attempt, we would see if there was a way to engage that person, but we'd have other staff immediately trying to get a hold of Facebook and locate the person and get police on scene as soon as possible. If there is an attempt in progress, every second counts, and that's what we're going to do. Amelia, what do you think?
We have a similar response. You know, we are a mandated reporter at our crisis line, and we do the most to collaborate with our contacts and to be as least invasive as possible. We also do have a mobile team that does outreach as well, and you know, calling the police in is the last response, and yet we do have such good relationships with our local officers that we can trust that they will work to de-escalate any situation that they go out to and respond to and bring that person to safety. You know, it's not first choice, yet they've made contact with us in one way or another, and that there is hope there. And I think that's what we're also seeing on these live streams is, you know, people understand the visibility that is happening with their suicides, whether it is a cry for help or whether it's a cry for, I need somebody to witness my death. There's opportunity to intervene and potentially save a life.
So I'm going to do real quick is sort of read the numbers, and I want to pose some questions to the group. And I'm just going to read because I don't trust myself to get it right without reading it. Figures circulated to Facebook moderators, and this is according to the documents that were leaked this week, appear to show that reports of potential self-harm on Facebook are rising. One document drafted last summer says moderators escalated 4,531 reports of self-harm in just 2 weeks. 63 of these had to be dealt with by Facebook's law enforcement response team, which is actually not that many when we're talking about 4,500 events, which liaises police with other relevant authorities. Figures for this year show 5,016 reports in a 2-week period and 5,431 reports in another 2-week period. And what this is showing is that people are catching on, and there is some sort of connection among Facebook moderators with the content from 13 Reasons Why. So people sort of making that connection of, you're the reason why I'm attempting to kill myself, and then broadcasting it, much the way you know, Hannah makes the cassette tapes in 13 Reasons Why. The documents then sort of talk about what they attempt to contact agencies to trigger a welfare check when someone's attempting or about to attempt suicide. So suddenly Facebook moderators are really having to do the job of crisis centers, which is interesting to me. And the document says, we are now seeing more video content, including suicide, shared on Facebook. We don't want to censor or punish people in distress who are attempting suicide. Experts have told us that what's best for these people's safety is to let them live stream as long as they are engaging with viewers. However, because of the contagion risk, some people who see suicide are more likely to consider suicide. What's best for the safety of people watching these videos is for us to remove them once there's no longer an opportunity to help the person. We also need to consider newsworthiness, and there may be particular moments or public events that are part of a broad public conversation that warrant leaving up. Moderators have been told now, delete all videos depicting suicide unless they are newsworthy, even when these videos are shared by someone other than the victim, in order to raise awareness. And they have sort of all sorts of caveats to this, but I mean, what they're saying are that in a very short period of time, we're having a lot of broadcasts of self-harm and suicide attempts on Facebook, and the numbers appear to be rising. What are y'all's first reactions to that?
I thought it was an interesting way to read their approach and the way that they are considering it, because what is considered newsworthy? Like, where's that line drawn? And I can see how leaving it up to potentially intervene is one way to get this person connected to help. And yet, what's the impact of those that are witnessing this? And what responsibility do we have with everyone involved in these live streamed events?
Yeah, definitely, you know, they're leaving them up, and I think Dan Reidenberg says in the interview with Rebecca Ruiz, like, we want to make sure that this person's friends are seeing it so that they can help. You know, hopefully there's a helper who knows what to do. But I think it's really interesting that Facebook is choosing to leave these up, hoping people will get to help and support, even though we know that largely the public is not well prepared or trained to be supportive. Bart, you had a reaction.
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? So if someone has made a decision to live stream this activity, regardless of what the nature of the activity is, there's a purpose behind that, whether it's implicit or it's an overt purpose. There's some need at play there, right? And so if the response was we just need to shut these folks down, I think that's potentially much more dangerous than this option of leaving it up and running. Because what's the consequence of just shutting it down? Two, the idea that all these are situations that require an immediate police response, that's not always the case either, right? So when we talk about, I think, and it's really interesting, having been involved in the zero suicide efforts, and April, you and I have talked about this, just this idea of tracking what a suicide attempt is not really that simple, right? What a suicide attempt actually is a really broad spectrum of possible behaviors where some things definitely look a whole lot more like a suicide attempt than other things do, but it's not like someone is attempting or they're not attempting, and we can just have a clear line on that. So you have this broad spectrum of behaviors that look potentially dangerous, and then you've got to decide they're doing this in a public and a semi-public, at least an online fashion, the new version of public. And there's a reason they're doing that. When I look at my Facebook feed, I frequently see posts from people who are at risk of suicide, or they're talking about suicide. And people are responding and giving them love, and their friends are responding in a way that seems to be being a need for them, right? So should we call the police on those folks instantly or block them from their thread because they're talking about killing themselves? That's preposterous. That's almost the exact opposite thing. So I think that as we're learning about our new behavior in an online format, there's needs that are being met, and we need to balance both immediate safety with the support network. If we cut, and I think that's what really hit me, if we just shut that feed off, we've cut that person off from the very thing that might be keeping them alive. And if they're live streaming, here's a hint, they're live. They're there. They're with us. And it means there's always hope, and there's always the potential that something can happen in a good way, right? And I think that Dan and you both in the article did a good job. We also be concerned about people that are watching this and their exposure. Well, welcome to 2017, man. There's no easy answers. And I think at this point, the decision to give human beings the ability to make a judgment about what's going on and whether to leave it up or not and how to restrict it, and not have any hard and fast rules, because any hard and fast rule that you set is not a rule that's based on any scientific evidence, because we got nothing, right? So
yeah. Let's like stop. And that was something that I really had to explain to Rebecca Ruiz. And I said, if you are calling experts, and like Dan Reidenberg is great, and if you talk with other folks in suicide prevention and they say that we have evidence or data or we know what to do, they're not honest brokers, because we don't actually have a lot of good evidence. We haven't. And Maddie Gold talked about this. What's interesting is Rebecca Ruiz reported on this on April 30th. She recognized that this was a rising trend before the documents were leaked this week, and she interviewed Maddie Gould, who said, we don't really have experimental data on this because that would be unethical to do, right? So we've just been guessing at what the right things to do for a lot of years. Bart, you got a comment?
Yeah, the whole ethical. Okay, so. Yeah, what's ethical? What if it's unethical to not do research on these things because we think doing research on these things is unethical? So I'm going to say that the whole structure of our ethics around suicide research needs to be blown up and start from scratch, because we've got a lot of folks who are really preventing us from learning about things that could save lives, because it's unethical to learn about how to work with people at risk of suicide online. That's unethical. So this whole oxymoron of it's unethical to do research on people at risk of suicide, but it's unethical not to do research on people at risk of suicide, because how the hell else are we going to know what helps people? And here's what's happening. This is the key. While all of these IRB folks, internal review boards, and researchers are sitting on their hands because this is unethical, Facebook and Google and behind-the-scene folks that aren't doing anything through any IRBs are learning what's working and what isn't in their own way. And how they're going to use that information, we got no idea, because it's not in the public sphere. So what we've done is, and this is important, by sitting on our asses and not taking risks and getting up to speed with the way the world is changing, we're letting a whole other group of folks dominate the data and the information about this stuff, and it's not in the public sphere, and that's a huge challenge, in my honest opinion.
So we've got a tweet. Mm-hmm. We've got a tweet that we should respond to, and I want to have, it's about the word normal. And so, of course, I would need for everyone to get out your pitchforks, all the statisticians and all the folks who are worried about stigma, like, brace yourselves. But the tweet, that was me being a little ornery. The tweet is actually says, even if we know that suicide is a serious action that we're called to prevent, it's hard not to believe that reporting on this normalizes it. And I'm going to talk, I want to respond to that because I don't know that that's the case. There is destigmatizing things, and there is talking about it in a way that makes it okay for everyone to acknowledge it's happening, but without saying that it is an okay thing that is happening. So if somebody's attempting suicide, something is very, very wrong. So there's no shame or problem in reporting a heart attack. Heart attacks happen, but nobody is desensitized to the fact that it's a very, very serious event and we need to save somebody's life. And so my concern is not that we worry about normalizing something. I don't know that that word is helping anybody, but that we want to destigmatize it and tell people this is a sign that something is very seriously wrong and someone needs help, and that we have something that we'd like for you to do. And probably if we're reporting on it without those pieces, we could report on it in a way that makes it seem like it's not a serious event that deserves serious intervention. And that would be a problem. What do you guys think about that?
I think there's some really interesting work by Sylvia Canetto, who's a former president of APA. And she's been working on the normalization of suicide as a cultural narrative since the 90s. It's very interesting work. The basic part of it that I think that I understand, is that she doesn't want to destigmatize. She doesn't want to destigmatize suicide in a very narrow scope. So otherwise, she would like suicide to be completely destigmatized, and there'd be no stigma related to the healthcare issue that is suicide. But as far as the cultural narrative is concerned, where it becomes an option, especially for vulnerable people, she believes that is very dangerous. So there's a strange combination of things that we would like to achieve as suicide preventionists. We want to destigmatize suicide, but we don't want to take away the protective negative effects of making sure that people who are otherwise vulnerable don't get messages that encourage them to die by suicide.
Other folks.
Yeah, no, your point about how people die in other ways reminded me of a couple of years ago. There was a live video of a reporter who had a stroke on camera, and it got picked up and pushed to a bunch of different places. And they used that as an opportunity to highlight some of the warning signs for that condition, and provided resources. And this was like a very physical way of saying these are the things to look out for. So there are certainly opportunities here for us to do similar things, looking at how other dramatic and traumatic possibly things are being live streamed in other settings.
Amelia.
Normal is relative. I think I've heard other suicidologists talk about normalizing suicide and the stigma attached to it, and the prejudice and discrimination, and the negative connotations around suicide do not stop those that are suicidal from acting on their suicidal thoughts. And I'm not sure we have enough data out there to really share that those negative consequences of suicide are really impactful for keeping people safe from suicide. So I think that is again another area that needs to be researched, and I'm not sure we're on the right track with that line of thinking as well. And yet, we have this field that is doing a lot of great work, and yet it's not enough, and we haven't gotten it right yet, and we're losing more and more people every year, and we're losing people more and more publicly than ever before with these platforms, and the impact of those affected by these suicides, which is one of the largest concern I've seen across the board, is the contagion effect and the exposure that people have to these acts, and will it affect them and their decision making and put them at a higher risk for suicide or self-harming behaviors because they've witnessed this. And we've seen some of that research sharing that those that are exposed to violent or graphic content may be at a higher risk of engaging in that behavior. So there's so much work to be done, and there's so much more that we need to understand. And normal is a setting on a microwave. Like
normal's not the word. Like, I'm looking for, is this a sign that someone's having a serious health issue
Yeah.
But just
and how to get them the proper help.
Right. So just like there's nothing inherently stigmatizing about having a heart attack, but it does mean that something's happening that's not good and we need to probably do something, and you deserve care, and that I think normal is a statistical term. Bart, you were saying?
Well, I think that, Des and I have been having a really good chat on this on Twitter. And Amelia did, I think, a beautiful job explaining this complexity between how the contagion of exposure works. There is no doubt in my mind that I'm very critical of the safe messaging community and a lot of the guidelines, because I don't think that the data supports it completely. But I'll readily admit there's no doubt that there's a relationship between exposure and suicide behavior. There's no way we're going to walk that back. There's a relationship. I don't think we understand that relationship really well. And I think we have two things going on at the same time. Our concern about increasing risk to exposure, and this is something I do feel good about, the data on the number of suicides that are contagion related, worst case scenario, is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the total number of suicides. We've got 41,000 suicides per year plus in this country. It is a tiny, 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 tiny bit of those that are in any way connected to exposure. So people tend to blow out of proportion.
But I will say that being exposed to a suicide isn't the only negative mental health consequence. So there are a bunch of other things.
There's all kinds of other things. Yes. So,
PTSD, there may be depression, there may be anxiety.
Oh, asthma. How about that? Nobody wants to talk about the relationship between asthma and suicide, right? So here's the point. But we know this.
The issue being that the ability to broadcast your suicide to a whole lot of people means that there's maybe vicarious trauma and mental health injury to a broader number of people than what happened in the past.
It certainly could, but we currently have on YouTube and all kinds of video streams where people can watch suicides already, right? So
so you would have to go looking for that. And we did actually find a great not great, but a good example subreddit on this.
Was it a great subreddit?
It was really stomach churning. So this is a subreddit for people who like to watch live stream videos, recordings of people broadcasting horrible things, usually deaths of other human beings. And like on that subreddit, there was a murder-suicide of a father and his children. And he live streamed his murdering of his children and his suicide. And then the video was captured and then it's shared on the subreddit and, for people to comment on. And I think somebody said, well, the line is, I don't want to see children be killed. I just want to see people kill themselves. And they were sort of chatting. Like, there's definitely folks that there is an audience for that. As disturbing as that is, I'm a student of human behavior, and that's important to realize. But that would be something you would want and you'd be into and you'd look for. I'm imagining pulling up my Facebook, expecting to see cats and pictures of people's food that they ate last night. And then suddenly there was a live stream of my friend, and I was sort of caught unawares that my friend is in the middle of self-harming or attempting to take their life. And I was just getting up and having my morning coffee, or I was just laying around watching a movie late at night. And so not looking for it, not prepared, possibly traumatized without consent. And a lot of people, which is very, very different than going and looking for it, I think. What do y'all think of that?
That's what I imagined as we talk about this conversation. I think people seek out that graphic, dark content for their own interests. But in the context that I think we're talking about it and that is getting public attention is this content that is coming across our personal feeds as we go about our days, and what do we do with it and how do we respond to it, and are people acting to support or connect or reach out to these individuals that are suicidal, and how do we respond after the fact, after we've witnessed this? Is there going to be supports available for these people that are witnessing these acts of suicide and these death scenes, and how do we reach those people that are coming across these feeds?
I mean, I think clearly the answer is no, right? Like, because nobody wants to fund this. Like, nobody's interested. Facebook isn't seriously funding. Google isn't seriously funding crisis work. That's not happening. Are any of the largest corporations in the world seriously funding crisis worker research? None that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, there's some talk, and even what's considered to be a large amount of money at Crisis Text Line is nothing in comparison to the research in the advertising budget of a single drug, for example. So it's not happening at scale. We are advocating for it. We'd like to see it happen at scale, but there's not currently any mechanism for that.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
And that was one of my big points in the Mashable article, which is however you feel about Facebook's guidelines, which people have a lot of different feelings about if those are okay guidelines or not. And people in our Twitter thread, just if you guys are following the thread, have a lot of different feelings about that. My big thing is, thank God Facebook will be able to collect data and learn something. Then will they please share that data? Because there are a bunch of us who are trying to do urgent mental health care that we really could use that information so that we aren't working in a data deficit.
And is Facebook in a position? I mean, they are clearly in a position, but are they sharing this content? Are they sharing this data and this information with these organizations that could potentially work towards bettering this response and better understanding suicide and the chats response?
Even their basic numbers on.
No. I see her.
It's a leaked document, so no, they're not. And that's the thing where I'm like, Facebook. This is sort of Facebook didn't set out to become a crisis intervention platform.
Well,
Facebook, so there's like
they found themselves in this position and they're responding.
They're a tech platform that they have obligations to what they do, and then they're trying to like ethically, how do we protect the lives of our users, both those at risk of suicide and those who might be witnessing it, who might be affected. That's a lot of conflicting needs to balance, and in my mind, it is do the best you can, but then share what you learned because this is data that's in the public interest.
Sure. Interestingly enough, the earnings of Facebook and the earnings of Google are advertising earnings. Mm-hmm. They have future-looking projects that they're very excited about the potential for the future of their companies, but their current companies, the ones that exist, make money from advertising. So they're trying to deliver advertising to individual users as accurately as they possibly can. Yeah. That is their reason for that. That's what pays for the wonderful network that is Facebook. All these features that drive interactions, all of these community groups, all this advocacy that happens on their platform is all paid for with advertising dollars.
Yeah. They're also paying for these. They hired 3,000 more people to watch this content.
That's what's fascinating. That's not very well reported to me.
It's not well reported, but they've hired.
And I'll tell you the short version because it gets real boring real fast. But what they did was they hired 3,000 annotators. Okay. What that means is they hired 3,000 more human beings who sit at their house probably, and they sit there and they have a screen in front of them, and then there's labels on the side of the screen, and you say, oh well, this looks like suicidal behavior. This looks like somebody promoting their band. This looks like something to do with pets. They break it up into a bunch of categories.
They have to moderate and sometimes send rescues. So they're more than just annotators.
Yeah, of course. So they have to. I mean, they have to respond pretty quickly, and we know that there's sometimes up to 24 hours it takes to response. And if you get a response at all, I mean, we've seen people report this content, which it's not easy to report suicidal content on Facebook. It's pretty cumbersome to click through the down arrows on the right side of the feed.
Yeah. And that gets to the language issue that we're reporting it, right? Yeah. Even the like you're turning somebody in. Our language around this sucks. But Tony likes to minimize this, but the fact that Facebook he does because he's so businessy but here's the truth of the matter. They are investing serious dollars and training in getting people to identify people potentially at risk of suicide. I think that's a big deal. But
are they investing serious dollars?
I think so.
Where?
You don't know that.
No, I don't know.
How do you know that they're not spending serious dollars?
Okay.
How about that? But right. So
reel it in.
This is important.
Reel it in. Back on track. Make your point.
So, but what is key is that they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart, and that I agree with Tony about. This is to protect their investment because it's bad public relations. If people are dying or stressing people out, or people having bad reactions from seeing these things on Facebook, Facebook's got to do something because that's not good for their bottom line. So dollars are involved with this, and that's the case we really need to make, that in terms of being a responsible partner in this process, it's good for their business as well. And so we need to encourage and reinforce that behavior, right? No doubt about it, and give them props. This could be something that they didn't attend to and they are attending to, and compared to places like other, I'm not going to name other social media platforms, but Facebook does a lot more. A lot more. And in my money, compared to all the other programs I'm aware of, Facebook does more than any of the other social media platforms to prevent suicide. So I'm gonna give them props for that. Tony, what do you think?
I mean, Facebook is the most successful social network to have ever emerged. I mean, they are literally the most successful people in this business. Now, could tomorrow something new come along and totally overtake them? Absolutely. That's what they're concerned about. That's why you see them making new investments. That's why you see them innovating. They care. They really do care about their users. The few people that I have contact with directly at Facebook do care. They really do. It's a giant company filled with people that have a bunch of different projects. It's just like the companies we all work for. Like you all have, everybody has their own little thing that they do every day. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily interested in the suicide prevention aspects in the crisis prevention aspects of the platform every single day. There's somebody that does that, but you might have never met them if you work at Facebook. They have thousands of employees.
Yeah. I think I wanted to bring up a question if there was an opportunity. This gentleman, Jay Matt, wouldn't this fall into the bystander's responsibility? The viewer should be able to report content responses should be quick. And I think this circles back to the reporting suicidal content, which the verbiage sucks, but it is what it is. And they have advanced in their approaches with giving options to contact the person directly to share this kind of scripted concern. They've shared an ability to link to Lifeline and crisis text line for immediate response to connect them to a crisis worker, as well as reporting to Facebook directly to review this content and to respond appropriately, which I was surprised. I guess I had known about it, but I was surprised that Facebook will contact authorities directly themselves for a wellness check. So yet there's people that are watching this content come through, or these live streams, and how can we message to these people? Chris?
This point is exactly where I was going to jump in earlier, but this culture needs to be shifted a little bit over. I agree that it's partially an opportunity for Facebook to utilize the capacity that its members hold. When we do talk about what Facebook is doing, they are collaborating with a lot of people. I don't know how much money is going, but there's a lot of work going into a whole bunch of different suicide prevention organizations and collaborations. That's all good, and to have that collaboration and to have that consultation with those organizations is key, and it needs to keep happening. But I think what we can start doing is thinking about how to frame the entire situation differently on the social network, how to craft language that is helpful and hopeful and supportive, rather than judgy and shamey, like reporting. And this isn't content I want to see. But using the community that's already built inside this interaction. Facebook has the ability to let you know when somebody's birthday is, and that's good. And they input that. But why not use some of these annotators? Why not use some of these moderators to start seeing some of, and it can either be a live feed or it can be like a live posting of someone's thoughts of suicide or attempt. But if one of these comes up and it says underneath it on your feed, hey, it looks like this person's really struggling. Do you want to reach out to them in some way? Have one of their AI systems kind of roll this out. Whatever the case is, but give that person language that is built from those collaborations with the experts, and take some of that that responsibility away from Facebook and give it to the people who might actually be able to care for that person in an immediate sense.
Chris, that's spot on. And just think about this. Language influences behavior so much. What if instead of report someone, it was get someone help? Get help, right?
Mhm.
If you just made the option get help, I guarantee you, I am willing to put money that you would get more people clicking on a get help for than you would report. Willing to put big money on that bet. And what if you could build in the option? What if, and then when you say get help, do you need help alerting authorities immediately about this person, or do you need help how to talk to this person, or do you need help on what is this something that is really a high risk? Where you could build in these different sorts of options that people could have and give them AI guidance on those things. Oh my God, that would be so amazingly cool.
But not only like coaching people how to respond, which I have to tell you, I've been so fortunate that people have come to me on Facebook saying, I'll get a Facebook message saying, I have a friend, another message who's in distress. What do I do? And I'll be like, well, it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm half asleep. But if you call the lifeline, so they can coach you on what to do. So like the ability to get to someone to coach you on how to help is really, really valuable. But also there's probably technology responses like, limiting, like, for example, Facebook might eventually get enough data to know who's a good helper and how to get it, bring it to the attention of the feed of, the 10 people most likely to be helpful, and also coach them with resources. Or it might like let you know who's vulnerable and make sure that a live stream of someone self-harming or attempting a suicide isn't showing up in the feeds of people who are vulnerable. Like, it might be able to do something that surgical instead of blasting it out to everyone. I also think like there's got to be a middle path between broadcasting it to everybody and making it visible to people who could be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're talking about it as if it's all or none, and I'm really certain that it's not. What do you guys think about that?
I think none of our crisis systems scale very well. And I think that the people at Facebook and the people at Twitter and the people at Snapchat know that. So they have systems that are designed for scale. They serve billions of users every day. What would happen if 1% of them called the crisis line all at once? Of it would be 1% of the Facebook.
Don't say that, Tony. Oh my God! Don't even say that.
That's what happens.
Who would pay for that, by the way? Who pays for when you call the crisis line? Who pays for that?
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, everybody refers everyone to the lifeline, me included, and not understanding how under-supported it is. That it's not getting supported by anybody really, or very, very few dollars. It's not like your healthcare dollars are supporting it. Very few of your tax dollars are supporting it. I mean, Bart and Amelia and Chris, you guys know better than anybody what it takes to keep the doors open. And if we ramp up people's awareness of suicide and awareness that they should call for help, then what?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where we definitely, and this is because of the work of folks like Dr. Craig Bryan and Dr. Glenn Coppersmith, we really are going to have to start relying on some sort of machine learning approach to screening the web, to triage and prioritize where we're going to put resources. Because the simple fact of the matter, I'll never forget the first time when VHR was involved in a project to identify people on Twitter at risk of suicide using this tool. And somebody said, well, just go check out on Twitter how many people under the depression hashtag. When you scroll, just do a hashtag search on suicide or depression and start reading through the threads. There are millions of people out there posting really scary content. Guess what? They're not all going to kill themselves. In fact, only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of these folks will even attempt suicide. So the content is scary as all get out, but we have got to have some tools that at least help us to narrow it down. And those tools don't have to be perfect. They just need to give us some support, because we can't respond to all the people all the time that are reporting pretty scary content. I think you're going to see a similar trend with the live streaming, that as people get more and more comfortable live streaming, right now maybe we're seeing more acute things being live streamed, and I don't know what the data is. I don't think anybody knows what the data is. But as that becomes a more popular...
Facebook knows. That's my whole point.
But we
They do
don't.
know what the data is, and the only way that we got any numbers is that somebody leaked them.
Do we have any? So we've got no idea how many people who die of suicide made some sort of a declaration on social media, either written or in video, that then died of suicide. Can you believe we don't have that data? Is that not phenomenal?
You can donate your data to ourdatahelps.org.
Correct. Ourdatahelps.org. Ourdatahelps.org.
And she's
Donate
got
today.
You've got a good radio voice, Amelia Lato.
I went to radio school, mother trucker.
Oh, you have the best radio voice. Do it again. Do it again.
Ourdatahelps.org.
Oh,
Donate your data today.
I love it.
I'll do all my voicemails soon, I think.
You're welcome. I will. I charge.
We did some initial research
on
detecting suicide from using machine learning on Twitter.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you that the algorithms are really good at it, and it is terrifying that the rate of detection that you can achieve with simple linguistic cues. This is not difficult to understand statistics. This is not fancy stuff. This is very simple keyword detection, very simple pattern detection. It's not rockets. It's not cutting edge high science.
Yeah.
It's nearly rocket science, though.
Yeah, I think he's kind of minimizing the.
Well,
little bit.
Yeah, come on.
In comparison to survey methods, it's better than survey methods, of course, because it's fully passive. But it's very simple calculations. Very, I swear to you, like the kind of methods I could understand them, which is saying something.
Did you get that from my Tinder profile? Fully passive,
did.
Tony.
I did actually, and I'm just trying to slip it in there, but you went ahead and brought it out.
You slide. Did you swipe left on me? I knew it.
This is taking a turn, and we've only got 9 minutes left, guys.
9 minutes.
So you're saying that
I know.
everybody could respond to a suicide that's being live streamed? That everyone should have the tools and know what to say and how to say it and how to respond appropriately?
I have so many people out there who have CPR training and basic lifesaver and first aid training. I have a feeling that if I suddenly grabbed my chest and went down in the store, that not everyone would be equipped to help me, but there would be a handful of people who would. And that there's a store that, is fitted out with the wonderful sort of civilian shock units. And my particular, in my VA and all VAs, you have to get basic lifesaver training. You have to be certified to do CPR. Like I carry the little face mask for breathing, and you have to learn how to use the shock.
I could save your life.
And I can walk in and do that. And so the issue is probably we need something reasonable to teach the general public.
Are you talking about mental health first aid and living works?
Maybe.
If you think you're going to need
suicide talk and suicide,
it probably has to be. For those of you who are familiar with mental health first aid versus doing actual crisis work, do you think that mental health first aid covers everything that you need a civilian to know how to do to get someone to help?
Not everything, but it's a good conversation starter, and I think it tunes people into being more aware.
I think that mental health first aid is probably a start, but probably we have to start thinking about BLS, but for mental health and equipment. Yeah. That this is going to make suicide, and I'm not going to use the word normal because I just don't feel like that serves us, but it's going to make suicide visible, and that people are going to know that they need to do something. So we should actually provide enough percentage of the general population so that when this just pops up rando in their social media feed, that they've got a certain percentage of the population knows what to do.
Yeah.
Are you talking
about Assist? Living Works Assist? Bart was my trainer. That's why I'm so great at what I do now.
Like the coaching that the Lifeline does for folks to help other people on social media is really, really great. And I think, why can't we start distilling that into a training that is available in a more public way?
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think about that?
That's a good idea. I mean, do we know that that's a good idea?
No, that's the thing. Like, we should probably, the whole thing about Facebook is that they could probably, provide those resources and then see if people who know them are more effective than people who don't know them. Like for the first time, we could probably actually get data about that. What do you guys think?
So one of the things that one of the folks on the thread, JMAT, just said is, well, maybe suicide intervention and mental health intervention should be included in all CPR training, which, hey, you know what? That ain't too bad of an idea.
I like it.
I think that one of the things with mental health first aid, which is great, but I think one of the problems that we have is most trainings aren't procedural enough. And if you've been CPR trained is procedural. It's muscle memory. It's demonstrating that you can do it. And very few trainings do that. Assist does that a little bit, but it's 2 days. And that's a real change. Really don't focus enough on behaviors and procedures. It's way too content based, but that's a problem for the whole friggin' mental health field in general. Right?
Everything is like making artisanal cheese instead of making a widget in mental health. Like there is probably this moment where we've got to make something that is procedural and sort of so we're generalized enough and that most people can do it.
And I'm going to correct you because I hate doing this, April. I don't. I'm going to correct you. It's not even making artisanal cheese. It's talking about making artisanal. What is it? Artisanal? Is it? What is it? Artisanal.
Artisanal.
Artisanal. It's talking about making artisanal cheese. It's not even actually making the friggin' cheese.
Artisanal
and that's
is delicious.
This isn't about the
Chris,
Tony.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris, oh my Lord, save us, Chris. We're in the last 5 minutes and we're moving into final thoughts, and there are 5 of us. Chris, I was wondering if you'd like to go first.
So Des pointed something out. She was talking about the media guidelines, and I totally agree with this, is that, a lot of these things need to be more concrete. They need to be more objective. Like we were just talking, they need to be more procedural. And Facebook has an incredibly unique opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, to collaborate with experts and with people on their own team to provide people with incredibly easy to find direct links to some of these things. Can you guys imagine what it would be like to be able to find a suicide prevention training on Facebook?
Ooh.
What would that look like?
I'm guessing,
Probably a
and we
live
haven't
feed.
talked about. We never did talk about postvention, but even so this, you just saw this. So now what? Here are what your resources are. And I put that in the queue and we didn't even get to that, which is how do we do postvention at scale? Now that we're going to have contagion at scale, how do we do postvention at scale? So you could do prevention and intervention, and Facebook could host people, getting access to some procedural content. And then probably Facebook could say that you may have just seen this. Here is postvention resources in your region, or here is the national lifeline that you could call to get to that. What do you guys think about that?
Love it. I love it.
Love resources.
What if we developed online suicide prevention training and scoped it out so that people wouldn't have to go anywhere to do their training? That would be amazing.
What if people funded such trainings and gave access to all the people across the lands?
All you care about is the money. That's all I hear. Have you noticed that with Amelia? It's money, money, money. We don't need to spend money to save lives, Amelia. We can do it on air and love. Air and love, totally. Amelia.
I basically live my life that way. You can ask my husband. So if you need resources, at Atos84.
Give Amelia some air and some love. So for
and
final thoughts, to Bart, Amelia, Tony, who wants to go next with final thoughts?
Tony does.
Final thoughts. If we can do all this other stuff at scale, deliver services, deliver products to your door in an hour in major cities, why can't we do this at scale? Like, we could. We just have to figure out what the model is for it. So smart people out there, go and do it, will you?
Mm-hmm. Smart people, go do it. I like it. Amelia.
I would say that be aware that you can be that person to intervene if you are concerned about someone at risk of suicide, that you can speak to this person and ask if they are suicidal and use the direct language. And you can also reach out to the resources that are available: suicidology.org, afsp.org, save.org, suicidepreventionlifeline.org, crisistextline.org. Although all of these services are widely available. They're there 24/7. Reach out and touch faith. Amelia out.
Final thoughts. Read a really interesting essay about why Kodak went out of business, right? It wasn't because they didn't have the technology. They had the technology. It wasn't because upper management didn't see it. Upper management saw what was happening. It was because the bulk of the people at that company wanted to do the same thing today that they did yesterday. Well, that's suicide prevention in a nutshell. It's time we quit focusing on what we were doing yesterday, get our shit together, and start looking at what we need to do to meet the need in the future. And this show is a good first step.
And my final thoughts. Number one, it's been another hour, and we only have one more show until we are on summer hiatus. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of suicide prevention programming if you follow the hashtag SPSM Summer. We'll talk about that next week. My final thought. We're about ready for people to be front row to someone's self-injury, suicide attempt, or death in a way that we've never seen before. This is really, really painful, but these were probably folks that were hurting and not doing well before. It's just going to be really, really visible. What I hope happens is that we develop new solutions, that we get new data, and that we find ways to help people at the scale of human misery. Because ultimately, and I do say this everywhere I go, and thank you to the good people of St. Luke's who had me, my goal is to relieve pain. And I would love to be able to do it at the scale of pain in this world. Thank you, Facebook, for giving it a shot with the guidelines. Please share your data so we can all learn more and help more people. Everybody have a great evening and take care.
Good night. Millennial folk rock rules, people. Write it down. Remember it.